Hi, we are the ADHD Skills Lab podcast. My name is Skye,
And my name's Sarah.
and we will be your hosts, chatting to you about practical ADHD strategies you can use, the research behind some of these strategies, as well as interviewing other professionals with ADHD about how they've developed skills and working through struggles in their lives.
You might know us from Unconventional Organization, where we talk about this kind of stuff all day long. So we're super excited to have you along, and we're going to chat through it together.
Today I'm with Trina Haynes, a host of the podcast My Lady ADHD and the creator of many fun and really informative social media posts about ADHD that I've really enjoyed actually having come across my social media in the past few years. So Trina was late diagnosed with ADHD in 2021 and has gone on to create her own wonderful supportive ADHD community. And I know that you're building so much more than that. So I'm excited to get into it. So welcome, Trina. It's great to have you.
Thank you. That was such a warm welcome. I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to this little chat.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've seen you a lot, but we haven't really spoken before. So I love the podcast for that. We get to really dive in, get to know people.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So start by just telling me, where are you based?
So I'm on the East Coast in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
in the US. Yeah, I moved. Actually, that's kind of what started my ADHD journey is I moved here in 2021 and it kind of shifted my whole life. Like my job changed, of course, my house changed. I moved about 8 hours away and I was really struggling at work and with the whole move and it kind of pushed me into therapy and that's kind of how I got diagnosed.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Because I was going to ask, what was it that was the catalyst? And so, yeah, for you, it was moving to the East Coast. Where were you before?
So I was about 8 hours away in Tennessee, so it wasn't that far. It just the move and the job change, really what it was the job kind of triggered everything for
Mm-hmm.
me because I had finally found a job that like checked every box for me. So it was like great pay, great flexibility. It's what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do, had a free car, got to travel. Like it checked every single box, but yet I was still massively struggling. And so I kept thinking my whole life, like, once I get the job that fits, I won't have these many struggles. Like, I won't be suffering so much once I get that job. And when I got that job and I continued to struggle, I was very lost, very confused, didn't understand what the problem was. I was beating myself up so badly.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up in therapy because I actually started having panic attacks, which had never happened before. So the move and the new job kind of just pushed me into getting help.
So you went to therapy, and at that point, did your therapist recommend that you get a diagnosis of ADHD?
Yeah, I was so lucky because my therapist had ADHD. And so she immediately, like from the get go, she was like, I think maybe you have ADHD, girl. I was like, no
Yeah.
way. I literally did not agree. I thought that only little boys had ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
I dismissed it right away. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, there's no way. And so that he was pretty persistent. She was like, I think you should get tested for ADHD. I think that would answer a lot of questions for you. And so she did push me to get that diagnosis. And lo and behold, it really pushed me to like educate myself about women with ADHD. And it opened up Pandora's box for me basically and changed the whole trajectory of my life.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, shout out to all of these therapists. I feel like this is a story I've heard before, the idea of a therapist who has ADHD or knows about ADHD, who's able to point you in the right direction because it is confusing. Like you said, you were in there with panic attacks. It's hard to plot that line unless you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, we started with anxiety. Like, obviously, if I'm having panic attacks, there's some anxiety going on. And she had kind of pinpointed anxiety could be part of the problem. But the more she spent time with me, I think the more clear it became that like ADHD was the issue. And like
Yeah.
anxiety, yes, plays a part in what my struggles were, but they go hand in hand. And now I know that like they kind of feed each other. It's a vicious little cycle, right? With ADHD and
Mm.
anxiety. And so that I was just feeding that monster, right? With all of my symptoms and trying to manage my symptoms caused me so much anxiety.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And yes, I agree that there's so many therapists, there's so many good clinicians out there that are helping women with ADHD, but I do know that there's still an issue. There's still so much problems when it comes to getting diagnosed as a woman with ADHD. And it's something that I talk about all the time because I hear it in the community and I hear how difficult the access to care. There's a lot of
Mhm.
barriers there.
Yeah, definitely.
I kind of see myself as one of the lucky ones that I got lucky that my therapist had ADHD.
Yeah, no, 100%. I feel actually very much the same way about my diagnosis, which we can talk about on your podcast.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. So tell me a little bit, you support and you work with ADHD adults, you support people a lot of, understanding how to manage their life in the workplace. Obviously, that's a huge place where ADHD comes into play. Before we get into that, I'd really love to know about your own experiences in the workplace with ADHD. You referenced it a little bit more just now, but what industries have you worked in? And I say industries because I'm sort of assuming, but
How
I
long
might
is
be
this
wrong.
podcast? Yeah. So this is something that I'm super passionate about because this is an area of my life that I've massively struggled in. I've
Mhm.
often said that I've had over 30 different job titles. That's not jobs, that's job titles. So I have flip-flopped. I've had jobs all over the place, but
Mhm.
I've been really lucky that I kind of found my spot. I found a place where I was okay in marketing, where I could
Right.
take those skills to any job. So
Mhm.
as someone with ADHD, like I kind of learned marketing and I could do that job anywhere. I could work for any company. So I did. I did a lot of bouncing around. I did marketing for restaurants, for nonprofits, for
Mhm.
IT companies, healthcare. I mean, I
Mhm.
literally have done marketing for every single company because I thought that was the problem. I thought the job was the issue and I could fix that. Like that was easy for me to fix. I could just go get another job and try that one and go get another job and try that
Yeah.
one. And so I really, really struggled in the workplace. I was fired. I quit abruptly many, many
Mhm.
times. I would have problems like with my supervisors. I really didn't like having supervisors. Like I just didn't mesh well with the management usually, or I would just become the
Mhm.
management. I would be the leader. And that's what I'm now know was probably more the issue is like I was a leader and it was hard for me to follow a lot of times because I didn't do things the way that they wanted them done. So yeah, I really struggled in the workplace and something that I talk about a lot. I now help ADHDers like even know what accommodations look like, even know what to
Mhm.
ask for in the workplace. And so it's something that I'm really, really passionate about.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm excited to get into the weeds of what those accommodations are with you a little bit. In terms of the struggles that you did have in the workplace, did you find, I'm just curious, was your job the kind of job where you stayed a lot in one place? Was it a job that involved lots of travel? I know, you mentioned your own car, or was it a bit of a mixture depending on where you were?
Yeah, no, normally I needed to be a little bit of a nomad. So I kind of needed to get out of the office a lot. I wanted like jobs where I was driving around and exploring. And that's what kind of kept it fun for me for as long as it did was the novelty and new and going new places all the time. But I also loved working kind of in an office environment where there were lots of people around and I'm an extrovert and I love
Hmm.
just connecting with people in the office, but that caused a lot of problems for me, right? Because a social work
That could
environment
be the
is
job.
fun.
That could be what we did today.
Yeah, it's very hard to like actually get things done when there's so much stimuli in the room. So yeah, I mean, I just kept trying to like tweak each job. Like I kept trying to be like, okay, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to try this environment now. And I was
Hmm.
constantly trying to like tweak it just a little bit and like, okay, well maybe I'll get a job where I'm doing this kind of travel. Maybe I'll get a job. And so I tried every job there is. I mean, if I could get an interview, I would go. I've applied for hundreds, I want to say thousands of jobs because that's what it feels like, but it's probably more
Hmm.
like I've been
Hmm.
on hundreds of interviews and I never put two and two together. I didn't know ADHD was the missing piece.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wasn't going to ask this, but you say you've applied for hundreds of jobs, and I'm just like shuddering slightly because I remember that experience of applying for jobs. Do you have any strategies for ADHD people out there who do need to apply for jobs, from your own experience?
I mean, now I would recommend working with a company like I work with Inclusively. So they're a company that it's like a job board for neurodivergent people. So
Cool.
they're working with companies who want to hire people with
Mhm.
ADHD. They're working with companies who understand accommodations. They communicate the accommodations for you. If there's any kind of service out there like Inclusively, I would just look for that where you can go to a job board and apply for jobs that really see the value in having people with ADHD on their staff. I can't really stress that enough is to like be vocal about the accommodations you need right from the get-go. And if they don't want to hire you for having ADHD, do you really want to work there? That's what I have to like ask myself is okay, if I'm uncomfortable having this conversation with this company about my ADHD and if they don't handle it properly, I'm not sure if I want to work there.
Yeah.
And not everyone has that kind of freedom to turn a job down because of that. So I'm
Mhm.
coming from a very privileged place saying that,
Mhm.
but that's kind of where I am with it is that I don't want to be somewhere where I'm not valued.
Yeah, that's a decision you've made for yourself, and that makes a lot of
Yes.
sense. Yeah, I can imagine,
Yeah.
especially the more you work in the space of ADHD and the more you support ADHD people.
Oh, the more I'm around ADHD people, the more I realize I don't have to put up with certain things and that I can speak up for myself and I can voice my accommodations. And if they don't like it, that's on them. That's not on me. Like I have to set some boundaries with companies that I want to work with and just be really clear about who I am and what I bring to the table. And that's taken a lot of time to figure out. That's not something that I just stumbled on. I mean, I'm still looking at that. Like, what do I bring to the table?
Yeah, definitely. So, but for anybody who has to apply for a job, they have several contracts that they have to read through, or they have some interviews. What do you recommend? What did you find that you did to get through that process?
Oh, I think just really looking at the job description and being really honest with yourself. If it says things like attention to detail is something that they're looking for, or
Mhm.
timely. I think not kidding yourself with what you
Mhm.
bring to the table, because if they're looking for someone with that specific mentality and then ADHD you shows up to work the next day, it's confusing for both parties, right? Because you're having to mask and pretend that you're someone you're not. And I think just being really honest with yourself. And it's so hard when you have ADHD because every new job is like so fun and exciting. You can picture yourself there. You're like, can be a florist. I can be a
Definitely
florist.
done
Like,
that.
I can open a bookstore because that's one of our skills is we think
Mhm.
and we can do anything, right? Like we're so painfully optimistic. But really look at that job description. Is that something you want to do every day? Like visualize yourself there. What does it feel like to sit at that desk for 8 hours?
Yeah, it's the full day that will really get you.
Yeah, and, like, you may have to dig deeper and really I think the biggest lesson for me is if there's not a job out there for me, I'm going to have to create it for myself, and that is something that you may end up walking away from is like, "Gosh, I'm really looking for this specific role that meets my needs," and if you consistently can't find that, you may have to actually go work for yourself and create that for yourself.
Mhm.
There's a piece of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people with ADHD, ourselves included, end up being entrepreneurs. And people
Yeah.
always say, "Why does that happen?" And I'm just like, well, one of the reasons might be it's kind of hard to make a job fit you. And that can be very, very difficult for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we are always evolving, right? Like when you have
Hmm.
ADHD, your interests are changing minute by minute, sometimes
Hmm.
hour by hour. And when you work for yourself, you have a little bit more flexibility to pivot when you want to. You
Hmm.
can start a podcast if you like, you can pivot much quicker. And I think companies don't allow for pivot a lot of times. And that really hits home with people with ADHD because we want to be able to create and
Mm.
pivot and try new things. And a lot of companies don't allow for that, which is honestly, that's to their detriment. That's not good for their company.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think it is a very, very tricky balance. And to anybody who's thinking about it, I would say, yeah, definitely giving yourself time to try and figure out like what your company can do. And then you're able to make that decision can be really helpful. And it's interesting you say the thing about the workplace, because we often talk about this idea of if you're coming up trying to find what you need to fit, what job works for you, it's not about what could I do? It's about what makes me want to get up in the morning every day, day in and day out to do.
That is huge. I mean, that just saying in that mindset of like, yeah, we could do so many things. What do you
Mm-hmm.
want to do? Like, what do
Mm,
you really want to do? And a lot of job hunting and job searching comes down to soul searching and really like journaling, documenting, like, what do you like? What do you want your day to look like? Do
mm-hmm.
you want to go to an office every day? Do you want to work from home? Do you want to do a hybrid model? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
It's figuring out what you want and not what the company wants.
Yeah, no, definitely. Although, shout out to all the people who just went out and got a job because they needed the money, because I've been there.
Oh,
We've all
girl,
been
yeah.
there.
I'm 2 steps away from that every day, I'll tell you right now. It crosses my mind daily. I'm like, "What do we have on Indeed today?" Like, I still look. I still have that
I
compulsive,
still
like, I
have that
have to
too. I
say
still have that automation, that New Zealand version automation on my Google Calendar.
yeah. Oh, my resume's updated even though I've told myself I will never work for a company again. Like, I'm ready. Like, if the right opportunity came, I would go and apply because I still have that part of me in ADHD that's just it's fun to like start a new
Mhm.
job for me is like exciting but that fades pretty quickly for most ADHDers. Like once you're there for a few months and the novelty is worn off, that's when people with ADHD really struggle is when you're
Yeah.
there and things start to get boring and they start to get complacent or it starts to get really difficult and that's typically where it starts crashing and burning and that is hell, honestly. That can be really hard for people with ADHD and I've been there. I have. Oh girl, have I been there. I
Yeah.
can't. I live that life.
Yeah, no, 100%. And before we jump into that, I do want to just switch it into a slightly more positive tack and talk about, looking back, did you notice any strengths that you really brought to the different jobs that you had prior to your ADHD? What were those?
Yeah, it's so funny. I've actually thought about this because a lot of the things that would come up at work, like let's say during my evaluation, would be that I talked a lot or that I was like distracting maybe some of the other people in the office because I
Mhm.
was very chatty or that I had great ideas, but like follow through was really difficult, right? All of the things that were brought up in my evaluations, of course, make sense now, but they all play into what I do now. Right. So, like,
Mhm.
I host a podcast where I can talk as much as I want to talk, right? I can interview people where I'm like learning about them. I'm doing now what I was doing then. Like, I was interviewing people in my office without even knowing it. Like, I knew
Mhm.
every single thing about everybody I worked with.
Mhm.
And that's honestly, that's a skill. And the companies were looking at it as like, this is a distraction, which obviously it was, but like I should have been put in different roles where I could utilize, not everybody wants to talk to everyone, like that's
Yeah, definitely.
it's a skill to be a people person. And like I should have maybe been a front desk person or, I should have been moved around in those situations. But now I've learned like almost everything I've done that I was kind of getting picked on for is now a complete asset in what I do for work. So
Yeah.
I've kind of flipped it into like those used to be considered weaknesses in the corporate world, and they are now a strength in what I do now. And I had a light bulb moment a few months ago where I realized that and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like it wasn't me." You know what I mean? Like I just wasn't in the right place. And I knew that all
Yeah.
along and I knew every job after a few months I would be like, "This isn't it." And I would want to go at that point. I kind of always knew there was something and I always knew what was wrong for me and I would
Yeah.
just leave immediately like no this isn't the one. And now I kind of feel like okay, I'm getting closer. I'm settling into the right thing. And I already forgot the question you asked, but I hope I answered it.
No, definitely, definitely strengths and ADHD. And I say that because I have the question written down.
Yeah, I think what used to be considered a weakness, I was just not looking at it right. Like I wasn't seeing it as a strength. I think that's really, really common for ADHDers is we've been told that these things about us are weaknesses and that we need to stop doing them and we need to hush and be quiet and not talk so
Mm-hmm.
much and keep our
Mm-hmm.
ideas to ourselves. And no, you just haven't found the right environment to blossom.
To do that. Yeah, no, definitely. So for you, it was really a case of just that reframing or that reviewing what you'd experienced, both in the negative and in the positive as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's taken a lot of time. I mean, trust me, those evaluations when they would sit me down and tell me like, "Hey, you need to not talk to everyone so much or you need to be more organized." And those little conversations were really, really hard. And I was so mean to myself over those. I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to like work like everyone else. Like, why was it so hard for me to get work done? I didn't understand that, and all I did was beat myself up for years and years and years, and,
Mm-hmm.
now it's twisted, like, it's flipped a little bit, and I don't beat myself up near as much, it still happens, but I see those things as strengths now, and that's really cool.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. And so, if I want us to take a minute here because I want to provide some really good strategies for people who are currently in the workspace. So, if somebody is in a workplace, let's say, there's a little bit of hybrid flexibility because that's really common now, but there's a lot of, sitting in an office as well. And they are experiencing being bored at work. How would you talk to them about that? How would you support them in that?
I would take some time and really brainstorm and write down different ways that you can make it fun again. So spend time, like block out an hour of your day and look at, okay, what are the tools out there that I can use? Is it a visual timer? Do I need earplugs? Should I work from a different space? Should I try body doubling? Like, write them all down, like, jot them down. What could work? What's working
Hmm.
for other ADHDers? Like, there's apps called Llama Life, there's different tools out there.
Hmm.
Write them all down, keep them handy, and just pick at them. If you're
Yeah.
really struggling one day, just grab one. Just like
Yeah.
grab one of those from your toolbox and try it. It's all about like trying and seeing what works, but also being okay when that tool doesn't work for you Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
It could only work for you for 3 hours, but oh my gosh, it worked for 3 hours. Like
Yeah.
you have to shift that mindset and allow for tools to be short term, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you can have a basket of them or a list of them. As you said, you can pick them back up. If you find these strategies really helpful, I recommend that you subscribe to our podcast so that you get them every week when we launch a new episode. One of the things I often talk about, if we're talking about the idea of like dopamine additions or fidget toys or things like that, one of the things I often say, yeah, I've got mine here, trying to find one that makes no noise. And one of the things that I recommend, and then I have to explain it sometimes for people who don't remember, before cell phones, which I kind of remember, there were these like retro toys where you would play, on the bus on the way home when you were a
Like
kid or something like
Tamagotchi?
that. Kind of like that. There'd be like a little thing where you would
Oh, like Yahtzee.
yeah, yeah, or you'd like have to like put a ball in a thing.
I'm telling you, I loved those things. I
I
loved
know.
them.
And I often recommend people in the workplace, they get some of those really old school retro toys. You can still find them, the little basketball that you have to shoot into or all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And you just have a bunch of those. Like I agree with you. I think the being able to be in a different space is really good. And so is, all of the music and stuff like that. But sometimes we just need to, like you said, have as many things as possible.
I think the biggest thing there is releasing the shame around, oh, I tried that timer once and I forgot about it for a year. And that's okay. Like it worked for a little bit. Let's try
Yeah.
it again later. Someone told me once on a podcast, okay, think of an actual toolbox. Are you using every single tool in that toolbox every single day? Like, are
Yeah.
you literally pulling out the measuring tape, the hammer, the screwdriver, the pliers, the wrench every single day? No. You're
Hmm.
pulling out the one you need to get the job done, and then you're putting it back. And
Yeah.
then you're picking it up later. And it's kind of how it works with ADHD. And like, I think a lot of us have this idea of like, I just downloaded this app. It's going to change my life. I'm going to use it every day for the rest of my life. And you have to let that go. You have to say, here's a tool for my toolbox, and I could use it Monday, but I might not see it again for 3 more Mondays, and that's okay. But having lots of options to pull from just keeps it fun and exciting for us. And I think once you can let go of that shame around, oh, it didn't work very long. Like it worked for a minute. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest one. I mean, I have a lot of specific tools. If you want to get into that, I could also share that with you later and you can share it in the notes if you want.
Yeah, I can definitely put that in the show notes. Yeah, that would be awesome. It is interesting you mentioned that actually, because it reminds me of something as well that often happens where people say, okay, we're getting into planning here a little bit, but okay, I've got this new plan idea, I've got this new system, and I'm just going to spend the next month setting it up. And then once it's done, once it's all perfectly set up, then my life will be completely organized with ADHD and I won't need to use anything else again. And I often recommend against that. And we talk a little bit in coaching about trying to find a way to do a little bit of it and then see if it works and test it and bend it and break it and that kind of thing. For exactly what you said, those systems don't often end up being the be all and end all. Unfortunately, I would love
Oh,
it
I
if they
wish.
do.
Yeah, that sounds really lovely. But honestly, there are a few things like tried and true things that
Hmm.
do work for me, but they're not going to work for everyone. But once you know those, like 2 or 3 core things that keep
Yeah.
you organized or keep you on task, like I know music is a key one for me, like classical music, AirPods. Like I probably would
Hmm.
not survive a work day without my AirPods. And
Yeah.
I like a visual timer usually, and then a whiteboard. Those are like probably my key 4 things that I try to use.
Yeah. Those are the things at the top of your toolbox, the really easy to
Yeah.
reach place of your
Yes.
toolbox. Yeah.
Yes. But sometimes on those hard days, I gotta like go through that little drawer in the toolbox that you never open and like look for that thing that I used that
Hmm.
one time and try
Hmm.
it again. And like I have to just be okay with that. I have to be okay knowing that not one tool is going to make my ADHD disappear, and that's okay.
And sometimes I think if you're trying to figure out what tools work for you, it can be helpful to go, what am I already doing? And kind of starting from there. Am I already listening to music? Could I branch out from there? Am I already using Google Calendar? Could I expand on that rather than going and doing something completely different?
That's another thing is, I mean, when you said Google Calendar, like I have tried and spent a lot of time automating as much as possible for myself. So that would be like another tip is to spend time on the calendar just to organize everything. Like block out time at the beginning of the week just to have a baseline for the rest of the week, just to like organize all the crazy files on my computer that I just saved randomly everywhere. Like put them where they go and like organize my emails and spend time organizing things. That only helps future me. And it's something that I can't just do once. I have to schedule it for myself to like spend time just getting organized, just like
Yeah.
getting back to a blank canvas, because probably by the end of the week, I've created a chaotic mess in my office.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I need to, like, get back down to, like, peace and calm and quiet and clean before I can even attempt a work day.
Yeah, no, 100%. I do this as well. It's a little bit like cleaning your kitchen where you're just like, oh, I can't believe it. I just cleaned this. It should stay
But I
clean.
think we forget, like, if I don't have a dedicated time for that, I will not do it. Like, I have to remind myself that this is
Yeah.
important and that, yes, you can probably function the other way, but should you?
Yeah. And you might miss a few more things. And it just checking in with yourself about what level of chaos is the right level for you, basically. It depends
Hey,
on the
that one
person.
varies.
Yeah, I know. Just
Oh, it
thinking.
varies from week to week. I mean, it depends too of like taking an inventory before you sit down at your desk. Like, did you sleep okay last night? Have you eaten today?
Hmm.
Like, have you had anything to drink? Do you need to go outside? Like, the stage has to be set for me to have like an optimal work day, right? Like, I have
Hmm.
to make sure
Hmm.
that I'm taken care of on all the other fronts before I can even consider being productive. Because if I'm
Hmm.
sitting here and I'm like, hungry, tired, haven't been outside in 3 days. Like the place is a mess. Like I am not setting myself up for success. In fact, I'm probably setting myself up for the opposite of
Yeah.
success. So really making a point to like check in with yourself before your work. And if you're noticing like, man, I'm really tired, I don't feel good, like it's okay to take time off too.
It is. It is. It's hard to remember, but that even if it's just going for a walk.
Even if it's an hour or 2 or whatever, like, it's really hard for us as ADHDers, I think, we have to feel like we're always trying to keep up with everyone else and showing any kind of weakness or showing any kind of, like, admitting that you need a
Mhm.
break or admitting that you're
Mhm.
tired. That's hard to do, but you're definitely hurting yourself if you're not checking in with what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. So I also want to touch on the idea of, because I think this is quite relevant because I know you're working on a few projects at the moment. People who are struggling to do big tasks at work, they have that big multi-step, can't be done completely by the end of today kind of task. And they're just having a hard time getting their arms around it, basically, and getting that sense of momentum. What kind of things do you tend to recommend in that instance?
Obviously, people say break it down into small chunks, which can be very difficult for someone with ADHD. A coach told me when I make my to-do list to use action words like instead of just writing emails on my list, like read 5 emails, send 5 emails, right? Like being very specific. So when you go to write your long to-do list, like we all do, if you have laundry on the list, okay, well, what does that mean? Like,
Yep.
how do I interpret when that's finished? Like,
Yeah.
that's multiple steps, right? It's just, we can use laundry as an example. So on my to-do list, instead, it's like, put the laundry in the basket,
Mhm.
take it downstairs. That's another step. Like, very specific, almost elementary style, writing
Mhm.
down tasks as far as the action. What are you going to do? I think
Yeah.
that has really helped. And then, or also, I'm only going to work on this for an hour and whatever I can get done in an hour, great. But sometimes with us, we'll be like, okay, my task today is to plan a wedding.
Yeah.
What? Like,
I'll plan a wedding and I'll see how much time I have left at the end of the day.
no, okay, okay, girl, plan a wedding. Let's just breaking that down into steps should be your to do list that day.
Yes.
That's what you need to do. Like, if you're struggling to break down a task into smaller tasks, okay, on Monday, that's all I'm going to do.
Mhm.
I am going to spend the day breaking down my big task into smaller tasks.
Mhm.
And if I'm struggling there, I'm going to ask for help. Like, I'm going to reach out and be like, I can't figure out where to start here. Can you help me prioritize this? And that is one of the biggest things you can do in an office environment is try yourself to break it down into smaller chunks. If you still can't figure out where to start because the executive functioning that we are struggling with, then you go and ask or colleague or someone, here's my to-do list. Where do you think I should start? And have them help you prioritize them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. And also, like you said, that planning, like not being ashamed to plan, because there is a tendency, especially with neurotypicals, there's a tendency to say, just get started. And once you get started, you'll have an understanding of what you're doing. And with
Right.
ADHD, with the executive functioning struggles and the time blindness struggles, we don't have that ability as much. We actually do need to have that dedicated time to plan, even though it feels in the moment like a
Yeah.
lack of action or something that you might be like, I can't believe I can't just do this. Like the first thing's on the list. I should
Yeah.
just do it.
I can't believe I have to write down open your email.
If there's a low executive functioning day, it's on the list.
Yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think just setting time aside to plan, like we
Hmm.
need extra time to plan because our plan of attack looks way different than most people's plan of attack. That's okay. But
Yeah.
like be aware of it, allow extra time for everything. That's another tip that I give.
Yeah.
Stop putting 500 tasks on your to-do list. really, again, look, did you sleep well last night? Are you hungry? Are you tired? How many spoons do you have today? And I don't know if you know what the
Oh,
spoon
yeah.
theory is, but like really look at what you're capable of and being honest with yourself. Like
Yeah.
you've lived your life, you know what you're capable of. Look at that list again. Is it really doable? Are you setting yourself up for shame, guilt, failure? Set yourself up for success with small, simple tasks.
Hmm.
If they're not simple, then you break them down again.
Yeah. And attaching the time to the task, I think you're right. It's so helpful. One of the things I often say to clients is if you don't know how long it's going to take, then estimate it and then double that time. And it's so surprising how often that's pretty much how long it takes.
I'm super guilty of like okay, I've got a podcast I'm going to record in 20 minutes. Okay, I'm in my head. I'm like, oh, I've got 20 minutes to get this, and this done. And then I'm late to the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like I show up
Hmm.
scrambled and I'm a mess, but I'm trying to, when I hear myself say, oh, you've got 20 minutes, I'm like, okay, a 20-minute break right now would be great.
Hmm.
Don't do that. Don't run around. Like I have to yell at myself quite often.
And we try not to do that, but yeah, it's definitely easy
It's
to
like
do
a
it.
good yelling at myself. It's like hey, you deserve to sit down for 20 minutes.
I like that. You're cheering yourself on.
Yeah, like when I find myself with an extra 10 or 15 minutes in between things, instead of running around trying to fill that time, I'm now
Hmm.
like, let's sit down for 15 minutes before this and think about it.
Definitely.
It's much easier said than done. And I know we're probably wrapping up soon, but I do want to mention the people at work that are struggling with like asking for help or asking for accommodations. I think we have this idea that we have to go into the HR office and be like, I have ADHD, help me. That is not accepted that often right now. Like there's some stigma around ADHD and it's not the coziest environment to go into the HR office and shout, I have ADHD, right? Like that's not realistic for a lot of people. But what you can do is say, I need accommodations. And you don't even have to mention the word ADHD at all.
Yeah.
So if you go to the office and say, hey, I need help, I'm just struggling with this one area. These are some accommodations that I think would help me.
Hmm.
And you don't have to mention ADHD in that conversation if you're not comfortable doing that. And it's okay to ask for accommodations as a human being.
100%. And people are much more open now to the idea that we work differently and we need different ways of working.
Exactly. And you will get a much different response. I'm not saying that all companies are like this, but there's still a lot of companies out there that if you come and you say you have ADHD, you don't know how that's going to be perceived. You don't know how they're going to react. They might be one of those people that think that everyone has ADHD. And so if you're feeling that you're not comfortable having that conversation yet, I would start with hey, I think I need accommodations here. I'm kind of struggling. Here's what I think would help me.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to say.
Yeah. You're like, I'll be more productive if we get to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get a better employee out of me if you allow me to have a more flexible schedule. Like, is there
Hmm.
any wiggle room here? I'm really struggling, and it's okay to say you're struggling. And we really, really have a hard time admitting that because we want to try to keep up the appearance we don't want to be struggling, right? Like
No. Hmm.
we don't, but it's okay to say, I just think I would work better this way.
Yeah.
And they want you to work optimally, right?
Yeah. I mean, hopefully.
Yeah, I just think sometimes people with ADHD, they get hung up on like, oh, I can't tell my boss I have ADHD. I don't know how to ask for help because I can't have that conversation. And
Hmm.
you don't have to. You don't have to say I have ADHD. You can just say this would help me work better. And I think that's really important. And hopefully one day soon you won't have to have fear having that conversation, but I think there is still some of that.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Okay, so I'm going to round it out today with some ADHD quick questions. These are questions we ask everybody on the podcast. Tell us about one professional achievement that you're the most proud of.
So I've had all kinds of jobs, but back when I was in my early 20s, I worked for like a foster family agency and I worked with kids in
Awesome.
foster care. And that whole experience was extremely rewarding for me. So I can't pinpoint it to one thing at that company,
Hmm.
but I think overall working with kids in foster care was really impactful. It really impacted me. And then, I mean, I guess what I'm doing now also would be a close second to that.
Awesome. Yeah. What about a professional failure that was embarrassing to you? How did you deal with that?
Honestly, the most recent job that I had in marketing, I worked for an IT company.
Mhm.
When I left that job, I felt like a failure. I felt like I should have been able to handle it. It was in my wheelhouse and it was a great job. I loved my team. It was very difficult for me to leave there, but I just could not manage the workload and it was causing me a
Mhm.
lot of anxiety. And kind of admitting defeat there was really difficult for me. But it also led me to do the work that I'm doing now. So at the time, it was really painful, but now looking back, like, oh, thank God I don't work there anymore.
Yeah, sometimes those are the catalysts we need.
But yeah, also it was kind of like, hey, thanks for giving me a shot. I'm gonna go do Instagram now. Like
Well, yeah, and do it very well.
it was very embarrassing to like just come out and say. And of course they were like, oh, you're gonna go be an influencer now. Okay. And I'm like, it's bigger than that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Well, you went and you did an amazing job. You did a really great job.
Oh, thanks. No, it's a work in progress. And yeah, sometimes I want to this is hard, right? Like what I do is difficult. And sometimes it's easier for me to just like, oh, I should just go get a job and not stress about this type of work. So I have that mental back and forth quite often.
Yeah.
Still a struggle. It's still a struggle for me to figure out my place in the workplace, whether that's working for myself or working for someone else. I am still piecing that together. But I think what I've learned now is just to like stand up for myself and know my limitations and know my
Mhm.
strengths. And that's been the difference.
Yeah. Even if that person is you, you're like, "No, me, I need a break." When you're
I
working for
know
yourself.
somebody asked me the other day, they were like, you should treat yourself like you're your boss. And who is your boss good to you? Like, are you a good boss for yourself? Are you working 12 hours a day? Are you getting out and going? Like, is your boss nice to you? And I'm like, oh man, I am my boss and I'm so mean to myself. Like, I am the meanest boss.
Yeah, it happens. It's so easy to do. And yeah, because you're like, no, you've got a 5-minute break. I saw that 5-minute break.
But you are the boss of you. Like, that's the whole point. Like, even if you work for someone else, like, you are the boss of you and you get to decide how you live your life. You get to decide what you want to put up with, and you get to decide if you want to have anxiety every day or if you want to choose a different path. And me realizing that that's been a doozy. That's been a whole lot of therapy.
Yeah. And on that note, actually, if you had an ADHD life motto, what would it be?
I don't know. I think it's finding community has been a really big piece of my puzzle. Whenever someone asks me, I just got diagnosed with ADHD. What do you recommend? Where do I start? My first thing is you have to find your community. You have to find other
Yeah.
people with ADHD. That's probably the thing that I'll carry with me is like, I have to be connected to other people with ADHD in some way. And without this community, I would not be this confident. I would not feel this much better. I would not be doing this work that I'm doing. Like having other ADHDers around me has just been just life changing, honestly.
Yeah, it's so huge. It's amazing. I agree. Totally.
So just like find your community would be my ADHD motto, I guess. Like find your people.
It's a great motto. Yeah. Find your people. I love that. I love that. Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and all of your ADHD skills with us today. I'll put all, like you said, those recommendations that you have in the show notes. But where can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
You can find me at myladyadhd.com. You can find me on Instagram, myladyadhd. That's my handle for everything. I obviously have My Lady ADHD podcast. That's a good place to get just some really interesting conversations with women who have ADHD. It's awesome. You can find your community there.
Yeah.
And then I'm hosting the first ever ADHD women's retreat in September of this year, and then another one in January of next year. So you can learn more at getlostretreats.com.
Awesome. Yeah, lots and lots of different ways to find your community. And yeah, I recommend checking out your all your things. It's really fun and really informative as well. So
Oh, thank you.
thank you so much, Trina. It's wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, Skye. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to reach out or connect with us, you can leave us a message at admin@unconventionalorganization.com.
You can also find out more about our ADHD coaching organization, read our free articles, or sign up to our online courses at unconventionalorganization.com. That's organization with a Z or an S. They both will get you there.
If you'd like to learn more about what we discussed here today, or you want to read the transcript, you can find that at our show notes page at unconventionalorganization.com.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and think someone else might find the strategies and stories helpful, the best thing you can do is share episodes using the share button in the podcast player, or leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or your podcast player of choice, letting them know why you've benefited from this podcast.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back in the ADHD lab next week.